Hey Prasanna, we are back again with another LinkedIn Live, and the popular topic seems to be Gen AI. More people want to talk about Gen AI, so
Yeah,
let's talk about another facet of Gen AI today.
sure. Sounds good.
So one question that has come up is in terms of how to come up with ideas, right? In terms of ideas that you start with, maybe one way to start this would be saying the age-old debate of idea versus execution.
Yeah,
Thoughts? Idea matters, execution matters more, and like in Gen AI, what type of ideas should one come up with?
I think and who should you get the idea from, right? Should you get the idea from Gen AI? Should you get it idea from a friend of yours, a
Correct.
prospect? So why not use Gen AI to
Do
create
ideation,
ideas to
ideation.
build Gen AI products with?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I've heard in terms of idea is that sometimes people place too much emphasis on ideas. If you're like a first time founder, then they start thinking about hey, let us do brainstorming, and that becomes the most
Yeah,
sexiest part of coming up with a startup. And like a lot of time is spent on that, and then a lot of energy is expended, and then like people really
yep,
feel good about that. But then like as you get
totally.
started, 6 months in, then you realize somebody comes in, sort of makes you face the reality and say, hey, ideas don't matter, and then execution matter. And this goes on for a while, and
Yep,
after some time, they have gotten the pace or rhythm of execution, but then they also see that whatever they did was like maybe very small. So at that particular point in time, it looks to them, okay, idea also matter, right? So initially idea excitement, then execution matters, and then at some point where you hit a local minima, then you're like, oh, maybe we should
yep.
have had a better idea. So one framing that I have found most useful is what I've heard from Derek Sivers, right, where he says that a business is equal to idea into execution. Very, I mean, it's a very
Yep,
simple, I mean, it sounds very
correct.
retrospectively, oh, this sounds very simple, but if your idea is zero, no matter how much
Absolutely.
execution, it's not going to make too much impact. At the same time, vice versa, right? I mean, you have great idea, but you were only dreaming about it, and you did not translate that into action, then again it is a
Yep,
problem. So idea actually becomes a execution multiplier, right? If
correct.
the same execution, if two or three people are there, and if they are putting the same amount of effort, and you come up with a slightly better idea, then for the same execution, if this idea was slightly better, then you have a better impact, right? So
Correct.
one other thing that we end up talking about from an idea perspective is, hey, idea, do you whiteboard it? Do you have brainstorming discussion, or are these something that have actually been tested in the market or extracted from the market? So that's why we talk about saying people who have domain experience have an intuitive understanding of what a pain point is, right? And
Mm.
idea is just that pain point, which is we also talk about it through the lens of jobs to be done. Somebody is trying to do a job, there is a friction, there is a pain point, and you are offering a solution to that. And that combination is the
Yep.
starting point of the idea. And the more you have that customer conversation or the domain understanding, where
Mm.
it feels like how you're solving a real pain point, is where that idea has value. I mean, coming up with this whole phrase of saying I'm trying to build copilot of something doesn't immediately translate to that, right? You have to
Yep.
actually think about what pain point are you solving. Again,
Right.
like a
I think
counterintuitive part of that is that in Gen AI, everybody is saying that, look, this is not customer driven innovation, this is technology driven innovation. So you
that's
have to
right.
do some amount of iteration as well.
Yeah. So I think that's a interesting place, right? I was having a couple of discussions, and one of the things with AI, there are a few things about AI which are very different from building software products. And what it reminds me of is when people started building mobile apps back in like whatever 2010 ish time frame for iPhone and stuff like that, right? There was a wave of people saying, hey, you know what? Web app developers can't build mobile apps. You have to think mobile first. You have to think differently. It's a completely different skill set. It's a completely different way of building a business. let alone a feature or a product, right? And today, many of the same things can be said by replacing mobile with AI. You have to be AI first. You have to think very different. People building, traditional products can't build AI products and things like that, right? And I think these are very, very interlinked. And one of the things that is actually different about AI is that, as opposed to vanilla SaaS, when you call an AI function to do some work, to solve the problem that you've created your idea around, you may not get the same answer every time, right? You may get a completely hallucinated answer, you may get a kind of sort of right answer, you may get a wrong answer, and so on and so forth, right? And that's a very different mental model to earlier. When you think about something, hey, I'm calling a database, I get the right answer. I call a map, I get the right answer. I call whatever I call, I get the same answer every time consistently. Same. So I think that is again where Gen AI, from an ideation perspective itself, causes a lot of differences in how you have to test your ideas, or how you have to think about your ideas and stuff like that. What I mean by that is, in the context of Gen AI, you have to think about, hey, also in any AI, any ML kind of a thing, you have to think about, hey, what do I have data to solve for? And how much data do I have to solve for? And what is the quality of the data that I have to solve for? And this is something that most SaaS founders never have thought about, because in most SaaS applications, your data is from your customers. Your customers are feeding in that data. That data is first class data. It's like high quality, whatever, because you are the one who is receiving it, filtering it, storing it, whatever. And then you're doing stuff with it, right? Now, analytics companies had a different problem. They had a lot of data. Maybe it's not clean, maybe it's not whatever, but you still, it's predictable. You put it in a DB, you call the same function again, you'll get the same result again, right? So with Gen AI, with ideas, what happens is, it's not only, hey, this customer wants this, I can provide this, I'll go provide it, I'll get it to them, we're done. It's not like that. You also have to see, okay, this customer wants to do this stuff. Is there data that I have, or somebody has, or somewhere else has, that is able to help me build something to solve this? Or you might have to take a step back and say, can I collect the data to solve this problem? Or what happens more often is, people are like, let me start with the data. What data is available? Therefore, for whom can I solve what problems? And are those problems valuable? And can it actually be solved? And this becomes then a bit of a iteration of, how can I get better quality, more important data to solve a particular problem that people might have. And it becomes a little bit of chicken and egg. So founders have to break out of that box, get that data in a different way, perhaps, or from a different place, different source, start building it, get into the hands of prospects, build feedback loops, and do stuff, right? But there's one more advantage with Gen AI, which was not there before, which is you don't need as much data as before. So there's an interesting thread going on in Twitter where in 2018, Google engineers said that deep learning is gonna break and surpass Google's relevance engine for search, and it might happen in 2 to 3 years or 4 years, is what he had said. And now Perplexity AI is basically building that. In the previous generation, Google's moat was actually not their knowledge graph, or not their link graph and stuff like that. It was actually the feedback from the clicks of people who were searching for things. So, especially for long tail keywords, when you would search for something, Google didn't have semantic understanding of what was going on. It said, okay, somebody's linked to this stuff which has these words. Let me give you this result. And then you would click on it, and then you would go in, and if you come back within 15 seconds to the same Google search page and click on the next link, then Google marks that as not matching this search query. This search
Right,
engine result
right,
doesn't match
right.
this. And this feedback was a big moat for Google, and that's one of the reasons why Bing couldn't catch up. If you looked at Bing, or if you use Bing, or if you used DuckDuckGo or whatever, on the head keywords they would perform very well. But on the tail keywords, and 30 to 40% of search queries every day are tail keywords which have never been searched before, or like searched only handful of times before. Those keywords, if you don't have that feedback, there was no way to figure out, right? But this Google engineer said a small startup with very little data, if they use not LLMs at that time, but if they use deep learning, can beat Google search relevance, right? And they gave an example of a small startup in machine translation, which actually beat Google, although Google had 10, 12 years of lead
In data. Yeah.
in data. But that small startup with deep learning beat them, right? On some metrics, but still beat them. And so that is what happening in Gen AI as well. So you need data, you need high quality, relevant data, and you also have to see what can I do with this data rather than trying to solve a problem for which there may be no data. And how do founders in this converge towards something that they can actually solve, has the data, is highly relevant, high quality, valuable problem to solve? I think that is the question of the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, until this capability becomes much better known.
One other area where I feel that founders may trip is like especially when we look at it from an Indian context, is saying we always are focused on product, saying that we need to build a product, and that means like essentially engineering. Like we've written some code, the code does some function, the war file, jar file, we've deployed that, or like we've deployed something else on a lamp stack, mean stack, etc. Right? So that's the notion of product. But what Gen AI is doing is it is saying that what used to be a tool before can now be promised as outcome. Right? The tools are
Yes.
becoming outcome. Right? So if you were intercom and you were selling software to help customer support, do better customer
Yep.
support because the volumes are really really high, then that involved that intercom support tool and a human to actually resolve the customer query. Now with Gen AI, they are saying, hey, there is a possibility. Right? It is not true today, but there is a
Yep.
possibility that the customer support person is not there at all. And therefore, like with that as the vision, they are saying, hey, we will work on a pricing model where we are going to price you for the value, the what we call as value based pricing, or what
Yep.
like Intercom is calling as outcome based pricing. So the tools are getting replaced by outcome, right? And people that are
Absolutely.
still thinking about tool, which is like product, are not thinking about the outcome itself, right? It is given that the outcome part is not going to happen, and before that there is going to be like workflow construction that is going to happen, right? Workflow is going to become workflow minus minus. So it will go through that step. But as you think about ideas, right, to just not be bound by the fact that hey, I'm only building a tool or a product, is going to be very
Yep.
critical. You need to
Correct.
talk to the customer says I want this outcome, you just deliver the outcome, you use the Gen AI.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. I think the classic, beautiful example of this is in a very, 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 very boring space, which is banks running COBOL on their mainframes. And these banks running COBOL on their mainframes, literally the people maintaining them are dying. They're probably 70 years old, 80 years old, they're dying. And the banks are like, they can't move off because it's a shit ton of spaghetti code. Lots of people, nobody understands what the hell it's doing. It's very flaky. One of the best airlines in the US, Southwest Airlines, which is basically the inspiration for Indigo in India, they had a complete meltdown of their entire servers, which were running on mainframes a few years ago. And Southwest service is like usually top notch, right? And so to have, you would think that Southwest Air computers would be, servers would be stable, but the servers had a meltdown. They had to bring back everything up. It was like a multi-day chaotic, multi-$100 million impact event because their code is COBOL on mainframes written in the 1960s and 70s, right? So there is a startup now, which is basically run. The founder is a services founder. He is building a company to lift and shift this COBOL code from mainframes into the cloud, into modern paradigms, and they're going to manage that as well. So they're going to take that recurring pass kind of a revenue from that, and they're going to use Gen AI to move this code from from mainframe to cloud. And I'm sure they're going to use Gen AI to write the tests as well, to make sure that the whole thing is functioning and stuff like that, right? So is this service? Is this product? Is this like, what is it? We don't know. Is he, would he be even able to do this with people? I don't think so, because it would take a lot more effort to do it with people, because like you don't have COBOL programmers. So like, are you going to first train COBOL programmers, then train them in Java or JavaScript or whatever, or Rust or whatever, to go to move that? Like, I can't even imagine, right? Because no banks or nobody has been able to pull this off, right? So I think GenAI has created a space where he's now has an army of essentially interns in the form of, GPT API call, to figure out how to do this, and
Yeah.
maybe they'll do it in a very iterative process or whatever, right? And I was very sad when I read this, because this is a US founder, this is a US company. I was very sad when I read this, because I'm like, man, there should be a company in India doing this, right? It's quite possible that this guy is hiring Indians in the back end, but there should be an Indian founder who's building stuff like this, because we actually have young COBOL programmers
Yeah.
who are maintaining all this shit on mainframes, right?
Yeah. So the India angle of this is also, like, somewhat interesting because of the pricing model. It gets confused, right? So I was speaking to a founder over the weekend, like, who's built a SaaS company for the India market, close to about 20 million ARR. And he was like, look, I don't understand what this services means, right? So I was trying to say, hey, look, earlier software was like SaaS, which is was tool, but now we are saying it's not software as a service, it is now software and services. Like, services, software as a service, and now software and services. It's like, look, but we only, like, we don't bill on a per seat basis, or we don't,
Yep.
because, like, the tool that we build, it impacts the revenue, and then on the revenue we charge a percentage. So, like, the interesting distinction of selling software in India versus US
Yep.
was that in India you can't sell tools, you already are selling
Mm.
outcomes, right?
Yep.
So you are actually selling that, look, I'm going to move the needle on the revenue by this much, so give me like a percentage of it. But internally you are building tool, you're not putting humans, and, like, you're not scaling the humans to actually deliver the service. So if that is the case, then, like, in India this may be even more easier to adopt, because what you need to do is that you are anyway selling outcome, anyway your pricing model was
Yep.
outcome based pricing model. All you have to do is you need to retool your internal tool set,
Correct.
right? Instead of that being, web and point and click, right? Can that be something else, right? And if you actually want to take this to Indian
Or
customers.
maybe the interface remains web and point and click, but you start doing more stuff around what you're getting from the web and point and click. Because I
Correct. So
remember
that is
one
one
thing
part,
that
right? Yeah. But if you are taking to, like, the end user, then, like, there is the element of, like, the Indian language, and then voice and query, and then,
yeah,
just using that to actually generate report. And that'll again expand the TAM of the market, right? So a lot of people may
yeah,
actually want to have a conversation saying, hey, I want to report like this. And then they like to speak like how they are speaking on a WhatsApp audio. And then if
correct.
they are able to see a report, then that is definitely possible today. I mean, if we were to do
Sure.
this something like this in five
Yeah, yeah,
years ago, you had to stand up a machine learning team, spend 10-15 million to say, hey, Indian language translation works, speech to text works, and all of that. So this
yep,
element of, like, there is new UI UX is possible. In India, there is already an outcome
yep,
based pricing. So this software and services as an idea should, like, take root in India even more faster than,
absolutely.
like, from a global
Correct,
perspective,
correct.
right? and
So I
and that's the
remember,
part that people are not thinking.
yeah, I remember, I won't name the founder because it's their story to tell, but they were telling me that they have a large multinational corporation as a customer, both in India and in Southeast Asia. Same company, and they are in a segment where that company's processes in India and US or Southeast Asia, their processes will be bang on exactly the same, right? They train the people the same, they do everything the same, right? And these folks run, campaigns for both the markets with a product, right? And the interesting thing that he was saying is, in Singapore, they will call you and say, hey, you know what? I don't know how to use this. Can you send me some training? I will learn how to use this, and then I will, start using this product. Vis-a-vis in India, they will call you and say, this button, this color needs to change, that thing needs to change. this campaign needs to be better this way or that way. Can you do it for me and send it to me? Right? When you can do all of the things in the tool, right? So very do it for me culture, right? Now, are you getting paid for outcomes or not, etc.? That's your pricing model. You make sure you're getting paid for outcomes and stuff like that. But I think in India, all of us are driven to by customers, pushed by customers to work towards outcomes. And I think that if you're able to take, and of course, we can have enough AI,
The
whether it's
back end,
Amit intelligence or this
artificial intelligence.
Amita intelligence or artificial intelligence, we can put enough people to deliver that outcome for a period of time when the AI is not ready yet, or when you didn't have enough data yet, or when you didn't break it down into enough constituent parts yet. Because one of the interesting things that I heard last week was um, there's a company which does something fairly complex, but let's say it's like a pilot trial thing that you're doing. You're asking something, and the Gen AI is doing something for you, and they actually don't do one Gen AI call. They take whatever you're asking, and then they do 50 Gen AI calls out of that to create something from that and then give it back to you, right? So this kind of a prompt engineering is not just about writing one prompt better, but actually breaking that thing down and saying, hey, you know what can we, what do we ask the GPT for, in what order? Maybe we use the GPT to verify the answers that it's giving. And so each of these is a different call. And so you do these 50 different calls so that you can deliver a very, very high quality outcome from that Gen AI piece, right? So obviously it's expensive, but they're shooting for quality. So therefore, they're doing that, right? So this kind of a work when you do with Gen AI, you can actually solve a whole bunch of problems, at least at a first year into job trainee kind of a level, but more repeatable than a perhaps a first year out of the job trainee kind of a level. And you can then you can make your prompt ladder, you can make your prompt cloud better and better over time, so that you're like taking whatever inputs the users give you, you're using this complex set of prompts to deliver a high quality outcome. Because the other side of the problem is that businesses demand like high quality outcomes. So how do you do this, right?
Yeah. So we talked about, like, from an Indian context perspective, what would be like a good starting space, right? What would be like a good starting idea area. From a perspective of, like, what are bad areas, right? What are bad ideas? I mean, bad ideas is not a great term, but, like, what are bad starting points?
Honestly, I am not sure what are bad starting points today, because like if you had said 5 years ago trying to migrate mainframes to COBOL on mainframes to cloud would probably be not the best idea, because it would be extremely services heavy, very hard thing to do, a very hard sell to make to banks, very hard to maintain and manage as well. I would have said, I don't know, right? That's not a good idea. But with Gen AI, with this person trying this, it sounds like something that should be done, right? So I think that we need to flush our heads of what could be a good idea or a bad idea, and really look at that idea and say, hey, is it possible? Like, do enough people have this problem? Will it look good as a demo? Is it powerful? Is it doing something that helps people a lot? I think we have to ask those questions of any ideas that we might have. And I think that's something that as founders we have these um, you know uh, perspectives and filters and stuff that we've built up in front of our eyes, that are like not letting us see and think clearly, right? So I had gone to Vipassana. So the Vipassana term for these is sankharas or samsaras or whatever. So these are like constructs that are built up in your brain from past exposure to ideas and thoughts and sensations, which then filter your view of reality, right? So some of us may have been burnt by a particular segment in the past, but with Gen AI, we should not assume that, hey, solutions that I can build for that segment today are not viable or not useful, or uh, not a great fit, right? And I heard of I was in the Together Fund event last week, where at least a couple of companies were building products in very, very dead areas, dead areas in the context of like 4 or 5 years ago. There were hundreds of companies, nobody survived, or everybody's struggling, that kind of a thing. And today, both these companies are actually doing really well because of what they could do with Gen AI. So we are working with some boring companies like that as well in Upekkha. We love to work with boring companies. So I think there is a bit of a uh, thing there of having to look with clear eyes of all segments, all areas, all ideas, not reject them, because maybe you have a good idea and you're using the wrong perspective to view it. Maybe you have a good idea and you're not looking at what you said in terms of, hey, what innovation has happened today in the AI space, which may make this solution possible today, and so that somebody can build a high quality, high revenue, high margin business out of it.
Right. So the good idea and a bad idea, like you said, Prasanna, are like, bad framing, because like both are starting point, and you have to think about it through the lens of idea iteration, or a better popular a term is called as idea maze. Like,
Yeah,
where do you start, but then, where do you eventually land? Because like, there are changes in technology, there are
absolutely.
changes in user perspective, there are like, changes in like, where your idea is more applicable. Maybe it's an adjacent segment. So when you actually navigate through this idea maze, this is where you want to think about this is
Absolutely.
like, is this good progress or not good progress? And in that, I think what I have seen is there are a few things that people like, forget, which is one is that, like, in the context of Gen AI, for example, right? So
Yep.
everybody is going ahead and building wrappers, right? Now, wrappers is not a bad perspective. I mean, as an idea itself, I mean, even though they do get dinged.
I mean,
um,
one other way of thinking about it is everything is a wrapper on an AWS VM.
Yeah. So SaaS is a wrapper on MySQL, right? This
Yeah.
is what somebody said. So you're right. So it's wrapper like that. The part that I think, people though miss out in that journey of saying, hey, I'm trying to build a wrapper, because if you were to say that, you said, SaaS is a wrapper around a MySQL database, then no SaaS companies will ever get built. $250 billion of revenue coming out of the SaaS industry won't exist, right? So that's certainly not true. But when you are actually doing this migration, there are a few mistakes that people make where, like, the idea maze progress, you face a lot of friction, right? For instance, people only look at growth rate, right?
Yep.
And from an idea maze progress perspective, they don't look at retention, they don't look at churn, right? So what is
True.
happening with Gen AI is there is so much excitement around it that there is a lot of traffic that is coming in, as long as you say that this is Gen
Yep.
AI, right? And people
Absolutely.
are just, sort of like, blowing up the echo chamber, saying, hey, if somebody heard a good product or a good tool, they'll tell 10 other people, and then everybody's like, oh, this is good, let's go check it out. So a lot of touristy customers are coming in. But then anybody who's done the journey to product market fit, traversed this idea maze,
Yep.
has realized that, look, product market fit happens when you know that you are having retention, right? You
Yeah.
have cohort retention. So
Absolutely.
making, and in B2B, you have to make sure that your churn is less than 3%. So are you tracking that? So you may have, like, great growth rate, but are you seeing like, good retention? What is the
Yep.
cohort of customers that are
Totally.
actually giving you retention? You could argue that whether it is mid market or SMB or prosumer, still you want to look at what that retention is happening. Otherwise, you will see like a great uptick in revenue, and then again,
Yep.
like, there will be like a huge fall, and based on the uptick of the revenue, you raised a lot of money, and then, you didn't look at the retention, then, that money can actually disappear, right? So it's not the bad idea, it is more a, like, not keeping in track of, hey, what is good progress, right? And in context of B2B, retention is very, very critical. Understanding what is the trigger to purchase is very critical, and
Yep.
how, like, expansion is possible, that is happening, is critical. And then how people are interested in tool versus outcome, and then what it means with respect to pricing, that is very, very critical.
Absolutely.
And these don't change whether there is AI or not, right? I mean, these
Yep.
are true if you're building like any product, right? I mean, any type of software product you are building, they are very critical. But in Gen AI, because the like, the top of the funnel is exploding, people are forgetting the rest, and then
Yep.
they land up themselves into trouble, like how Jasper Data AI landed themselves into trouble, where there's a huge growth but 80% churn, and then now, like,
Yep.
inflated expectation around valuation, and now you are caught in between,
Very
and you
hard.
want to be more careful about saying you're following
Yep.
your retention curves.
No, no, absolutely. I think that is so true, right? I think, but it's also very hard to uh, predict how it's going, right? Because some of these signals may be false positives, some of them may be false negatives, and it happens over time so dynamically. There is a fog of war, right? So
Yeah,
you don't know if is that churn in the right segment, in the wrong segment. Are they churning because they're finding better products, or are they churning because this use case doesn't work, or are they
or that
churning because
segment is
some other
SMB and
reason?
they die, right? Yeah,
That's what happens anyway, or is their use case only once a year, therefore they're it's not really churn, but they have very low usage. So I think, like, especially in places like where we are now, uh, in the AI space, where things are changing on a daily basis, daily, weekly, monthly basis, changes, amount of changes is insane. I think it's very hard for founders to see, hey, I'm like, where am I? Uh, and the sand under your feet is shifting. So today you may be in, Belandur, and tomorrow you might be in MG Road. We don't know, right? Or vice versa. Uh, we don't know, right? And I think that's where founders have a very hard job today to do, of figuring out, hey, who am I serving? How is that changing? What data do I have? How is that data changing? How do I maintain the AI bits? Because I was talking to somebody else who's doing this, and he was saying, let's say you do some training, fine tuning, all of that stuff, and you go from 55% on your whatever metric accuracy, or whatever score, to say 85%, right? You
85%.
did a
Yeah,
whole bunch of work to do that, and then you let that model be for 6 months, right? And you'll be back at 65%. You didn't change the model, but the model is back at 65%, because the data changes, the way people use your product changes, so many things change. So machine learning maintenance is not like a VM maintenance. It is far more involved, because like, everything is changing around us, right? So I think, like, founders are in, I think, in the phrase of, you know it's apocryphal whether what it is exactly, but it's like, may you live in interesting times, right? And so we are definitely living in interesting times. Is it a blessing? Is it a curse? I think that is also part of what kind of a mindset people come from, whether they come from a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. I think the people who are able to grab that, with a growth mindset, to say, hey, this is something that I'm going to, like, create value with, is going to make a big difference.
yeah. We're out of time, so we should continue some of this discussion in our next LinkedIn live. I think we are leaving many questions open. I'm sure like a lot of
Yeah.
people have follow-up questions, and maybe we should take questions next time with the audience. Prasanna, let's wrap up for today. So, folks, we'll see you in another LinkedIn live. So, till we see you again, bye.
All right. Bye.